Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for joining this session, Infosys Cobalt session, creating value from the confluence of technology forces. I think it's definitely exciting to be back here at Vegas. After I have come back here after 4 years. I was told that there was an event last year, but much smaller. This time I think it's about 50,000-60,000 that have come back for AWS reInvent. And I'm definitely excited, and this is my first reInvent, Oh, sorry. It's not working. Apologies for the technology problems, but I think, I would have loved to continue my Thanksgiving holidays in Vegas, but, to come back, but thankfully, there's a lot that at least I've learned over the last couple of days since I've come here. And there's a lot more that I'm sure we would learn over the next couple of days. This is a session that's going on. This event is going on till the end of this week. So I think that's definitely going to be interesting. The only thing that I have personally, thought, right, we'll learn a lot about cloud. But one thing that I also want to make sure that, we don't get clouded. Our brain does not get clouded by all of that information. So I think that is something that we want to demystify in this particular session. We'll talk about how we demystify this confluence of technology forces and how do we actually create this value, right, and cover some of the details as we go through. But before I sort of get into the details, I just thought, wanted to thank AWS leadership for giving us this opportunity. And also, jointly present this with Comerica Bank, with Cisco Systems and Kony Corporation. I think that's definitely, you have 3 different perspectives that you would get from the industry, 3 different industries, and hear a lot more from the other speakers. But one thing that I do want to say, right, I think there's this classic Vegas saying, what happens is in Vegas always stays in Vegas. But I would say, encourage you to think of, change that whole narrative, saying what happens in Vegas should actually go out everywhere, right? That's how informative and knowledgeable this session would be, and you would probably hear a lot more from the use cases from the various industries and experts that we've got speaking next, right? Just to sort of set the context a little bit, again, brief intro. I'm a senior vice president. I run the financial services vertical sales for financial services and head the capital markets for Infosys, and I'm based out of New York. While I cover financial services, I have a lot of the use cases that we deal with are across the verticals, and I've been interacting with many clients as part of my role. And it's definitely interesting to bring some of those perspectives and share with our clients. And a lot of our clients actually found interest in hearing what's happening in retail and manufacturing, stuff like that. So just to sort of talk about, we know there are a lot of industry trends, that are happening, and newer trends like digital payments revolution that's happening across the world. Of course, it still has to come to US. While we lead in technology in many things, but payments is something that's picked up quite a bit in the emerging world, emerging nations. And then we also see a confluence of businesses, right? I mean, like Apple entering into helping open a bank account, or having an Apple card, or Walmart opening a bank, right? There is confluence of business forces. There is a confluence of technology forces. You see a lot of technologies, right? Be it the 5G, edge, IoT, data, a lot more focus on data analytics. I mean, we have heard this morning from Adam. I was quite scared based on what he has told, the number of products that they have launched. I guess it's just a matter of time. Amazon would be the one that will be end-to-end, serving across the technology lifecycle, right? It's not just about, it's no longer about infrastructure. If you see the keynote, almost 30 to 40 minutes was spent on data analytics and the products that they have in that space. I think that's going to be the key for any of the organization in terms of being able to create value and deliver outcomes, right? So I just thought, before I sort of jump into some of the details, talk a little bit about Infosys and what we have done in this space. We are one of the top 3 partners for AWS, and we've been in partnership with AWS for the last 10, 11 years, and we've done a lot of work, right, in terms of developing accelerators, assets, and Infosys Cobalt is actually bringing all of that together and helping deliver value to the clients, right? And that's something that has been leveraged by our clients extensively, and we continue to enhance that. And today, as we speak, there are about 200,000 assets that have been built as a part of this Cobalt. It's not just about helping you through the disposition, but also helping you through the entire life cycle, right? It starts from right from the rehosting to actually reimagining the entire business process. So we've got assets that will actually help you through that whole cycle and also help you through a seamless migration to the target state, right? Through the whole transformation process. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the idea today is to sort of demystify this whole process, right? How do we create the business value when you have so many different technologies and so many different things happening in your environment? So before I just thought I'll also talk briefly about what we actually are planning to, how are we delivering this value to the clients, right? How are we actually working with clients in terms of delivering this value? All of us, this is a topmost priority of CTO, and most CTOs obviously have to make sure that they align their priorities with the business outcomes, the business that they are actually working in, right? And the way we have redefined CTO is the C is all about establishing that right cloud foundation. And the second one, T, is all about having the developing the right technology platforms that will help deliver the value. And third one is all about being able to deliver the business outcomes, right? It's about delivering the business outcomes that will actually matter both for your own organization, for yourself, and also for the end clients that are actually working with you, right? So I think that's how sort of want to demystify. And we've got speakers. I want to introduce the speakers here who are here today. John Wei from Comerica Bank. He's going to talk about some of the work that he has done extensively in terms of establishing that foundation and also helping bank deliver that value through the various use cases. Then we've got Nasir. Again, he's responsible for a platform that I don't know how many of you know, Cisco TAG platform. This is something that I've used in the past, about 25 years back. Cisco TAG is basically Technical Assistance Center. And that is something that's the heart of Cisco, right? If anything fails, any network device, the first port of call is to actually Cisco TAG, or you need any support. And then that should be running super efficiently, and it should be available 24/7. And his focus is to actually help those TAG engineers so that they can service their clients better. And then we've got Tiro from Kuni Corporation. Again, he's head of partnerships for IoT. And again, there, many times we take it for granted when we actually take a lift, an elevator, sorry. What happens if it stops at the 60th floor? I don't think that ever crossed our mind. We always, think that, this works, but there's a lot of work that goes behind it. And how each one of them have used AWS and the partner ecosystem, partners like Infosys, to be able to build solutions that can deliver value. So with that, I'll invite John to sort of talk about his journey.
Well, thank you, Nagesh.
Sorry.
My name is John Wei. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Comerica Bank. So for my part, I'd like to cover kind of 4 key points. One is, what do we have accomplished? Not so much about talking about the accomplishment, but hopefully give you a very concrete idea. When we use the term of cloud, what do we actually mean? Because fundamentally, we see cloud as much as a technology, but also as an ecosystem. It's a value delivery system. So point now, number 1 is what actually cloud is and where we are on this journey. Point number 2 is when you go through a cloud transformation, it really is a team sport. You have to bring a lot of folks together, which I call a multi-variable big game. And in this game, it helps to have a governing philosophy. How do you think about taking strategic projects in the logical cadence so you can actually get things organized appropriately? The third piece is it's pretty easy as you get through the digital journeys and the cloud journeys and really get caught up in the technical details, which inevitably we have to do, but forgetting about where the value comes from. So I think I want to share with you a little bit how we see and define the value of the cloud transformation. And I also want to share with you a little bit, given where we are and the success we have accomplished, where do we go next, more from an industry perspective. So, so next slide. So let me just do a quick click. So what we have done is, so a quick intro of Comerica Bank. We've been around for 170 plus years. And we are a full service bank, commercial, retail, and wealth management. We are a leading funding source for ESG projects in the US, but also for private equities. And we made our name by being very focused on the relationship, setting a higher standard of banking, but of course staying relevant with technology. So we had 3 legacy data centers. Over the past 2 years, we have shut down 2, fully decommissioned 2 out of 3 data centers. We moved our core banking backend into the public cloud. We moved our general ledger, which is comparable to our ERP system for bank, into the public cloud. We moved a massive amount of the workload into our multi-cloud environment. And we were very intentional on not using the term hybrid cloud because we believe that private cloud is really a technology cul-de-sac. You can achieve a degree of automation, but you can never achieve the economy of scale that public cloud gives to you. So we are more than 50% of our workload is in the public cloud today, and we're on track to decommission the last data center. We also moved hundreds of our agents entirely to the AWS Connect environment. So when you call Comerica Bank to get your payment authorization, the platform runs entirely on AWS Connect. In addition to that, we launched our digital platforms that's being used by hundreds of thousands of users, and they have a rating in the App Store north of 4.5. And these applications are developed at a rapid pace. We're talking about months, not years. And all that is using cloud-native technologies. And so our strategy is cloud first, meaning starting with the SaaS, then going down to the platform as a service, AWS, RDS being an example, allowing us to scale rapidly. Lump-down functions is another example, serverless, so that we can really leverage that composable architecture. But of course, the infrastructure as well. So along this journey, we started with a lift shift to create the migration momentum so that we can fully exercise and validate our security controls. But somewhere in the journey, we actually shifted. And we kept it called data center DCM, data center migration, but we changed the term M from migration to modernization. Because once we have generated the momentum, we really felt there is an opportunity to become more ambitious, to lead in the digital space. So as you guys can imagine that when you have a bank, a leading bank, one of the largest kind of banks in the US and lots of customers processing billions of payments a day, and there's a lot of complexity around it, right? It's very easy to get excited about, hey, let's do this control tower, or let's introduce this Lambda function. But how come that a lot of banks are struggling with actually doing it, right? So I think one of the key idea that we have adopted is, if you think about technology, if you just draw a line on the horizontally, and the value is on the vertical axle. Turned out, if you have no technology, this day and age is very difficult to create a value. On the other hand, if you're just You have not met a technology you don't like. You just keep on adopting new technology. What happens is, in reality, you're really building the technology museum for tomorrow, right? All that dead weight is going to slow you down. So in many cases, I think the large enterprise is not moving fast enough to the newer technology because they have not made a commitment to fundamentally reduce the complexity. So if you know that technology, no technology creates no value, too much technology creates little value, so it's a bell curve. So what's really important on this curve is the natural tendency is to think, oh, let's go and try to figure out where the kind of the pinnacle, right? Let's try to stay on the top. The reality is this curve will shift depending on where you are in the digital journey. So the right approach is not trying to sub-optimize, rather you really have to play on both sides at the same time. You really have to, what my boss will say, the favorite sport is introducing new technology, new automation to leapfrog, right? Leapfrog and be more nimble, more decisive, making those technology decisions. But the second and equally favorite hobby is to get rid of things, being aggressive in retirement. And this is one of the reasons I think when we declared the ambitious goal to be 100% out of the on-premise data center, frankly, it's really not about the building itself. It's getting rid of the asset, the mind share that we have to spend on managing the legacy environment, because anytime you go through that, a physically shutting down a data center, the opportunity presents itself to, frankly, retire a large chunk of legacy application that, frankly, often what you have is an application, there's always a reason to use it, but perhaps some other application already have that duplicate capabilities in many cases. So when you play on both sides, what happens is you used to play that digital journey on one side, right? You play on, tends to be on the introduction side. You have this ever-increasing kind of IT budget. When you play on both sides, your budget actually becomes more stable, but your workload actually increases because you just double your game on both sides. This is where the ecosystem partners really comes in. So we are no longer treating our partners as vendors that comes in, do some contract job for us. We really see our ecosystem partners, AWS, and any other service providers as extension to our team. And that's really the critical philosophical change. So how does this manifest on a day-to-day? The day-to-day as a customer, as a client, we put more focus on deciding what, where does the value come from, and frankly, relying more on our partners on the how. Now, we did strengthen tremendously our architectural governance capabilities, having a clear, granular, detailed technology roadmap so that we know what good looks like. But we really tap into the scale of a company like Infosys and to get into the granular the how aspect. And part of that requires a cultural change of what I call intellectual humility, to recognize that when we as a client, we know a lot about the banking industry as a whole, but perhaps we're living in a box, whereas large system integrators, partners live outside the box, and they have a view, but also actual practices that we can leverage and benefit from. So why we're doing the cloud? So I think the best way is to borrow a statement in our annual report from our CEO back in 2019. Really talking about rapidly adopting cloud computing to help us to become more scalable, resilient, and agile. You know what's missing in this statement? What's really interesting? He's not talking about containers, Dockers. He's not talking about Terraforms, right? And he's not talking about control towers. What he's talking about is scalability, resiliency, and agility. And that's where the value comes from. So how does this manifest itself into a day-to-day project? Well, the first start with a customer focus. So what does it really mean? We're back on the infrastructure side, we're on the cloud side. How do you create a customer focus? Turned out, traditionally, a project, if you look at a typical project, roughly about 40% of the energy is spent on figuring out the infrastructure. And when you talk to a developer, it's like, hey, what server do you want? What does the developer know? The developer says, okay, I need 2 application server, 2 web server. It's always, 4 gig or 8 gig RAM and 32 core CPUs. And hopefully we meet it. The infrastructure supersize it, right, and try to make it big. And now you have a 4 to 6 months procurement cycle. A couple weeks ago, our business CIO took me out for dinner, for my birthday, so nice of him. He actually made a statement. He said, this is the first place I've been to where I never have to escalate an infrastructure issue. It just happens. Think about the freedom and the time you as an application team will have when you, instead of spending 60% of the project time on listening to the customer and figuring out the customer experience, now you get a full throttle to 100% of the time, actually listening to your customers and figuring out the use cases. I do believe this is one of the key secrets why we can go fast, but at the same time, achieving 4.5 plus App Store ratings on the mobile applications. Speed is really critical, right? So the AWS RDS, for us, is in many ways is a game changer. Because our ability, or same with Lambda functions, our ability to handle or KMS for encryption. Just think about our ability to get into the control panels and configure all these capabilities in an environment that is compliant, secure, and compliant with our regulatory standards, and make that available to the application team, as opposed to go through procurement, try to get license, get third-party risk. Think about how long that lead time is. I think the other element sometimes is not fully appreciated is, I talked about many of the applications that are used by hundreds of thousands of users. The reality is those adoption don't happen on day one. On day one, you have tens of thousands, and you kind of scale it up. Think about the economics that when you have hardware that are on a 3-year refresh cycle, and when you allow the environment to scale to the demand, and you pay by the drink, right? As opposed to try to host the biggest party possible, thinking 3 years down the road, this thing may grow to a certain size, which means half the time, half the equipment are really not being used. That really changes the economics. I think the other element is security. So we actually fully mapped our security compliance environments. There's 225 controls that are mapped into the cloud environment. For every application we move into the cloud, we go through that. But all that happens and is pre-provisioned for the application team through the control framework. So you don't really have to worry about those details. So where are we headed to? Well, fundamentally, we see 3 digital journeys in the banking space. Digital journey 1.0 really is about ease of access. I think in many industries, you have very similar, comparable kind of situations is how do you make it easy for people to access, right? Application anytime, anywhere, on any device. But there's digital 2.0. And the digital 2.0 is about all these custom capabilities we have developed for large enterprise customers. And how do we turn that black box through for example, AWS API, and make that capability into a gray box so that we can compose at a lower economic cost for additional customers. And of course, the next logical step is externalize those APIs, ideally link it up with an ecosystem partners, data connectors to create an open box environment. We call this digital 2.0. And the digital 3.0 is the idea that you go from data warehouse. It's really about retroactive reporting toward a data lake, where you started creating more interesting AI machine learning use cases to a data river, so that anybody who has a reason to take a drink of the data to come up with additional insight will have easy access to that environment. So now that we have migrated or modernized to a point, we do have one of the leading positions, at least the banks, in terms of technology stack or technology environment, our next step ambition really is to move toward a best managed technology environment. So what do I mean by that? Is going through, of course, SLA, KPIs, but also partner differently with our system partners. If you think about traditional IT management is driven by set of processes, which tends to be a product of organizational structure, which tends to be driven by a set of regulatory requirements, and you ended up with a really complex process, which ended up producing a set of FTE headcount. In the end, you're paying for the headcount. What we really want to do instead is really look at the environment from a business point of view. How many resource units, how many servers, network devices we have, and really come into an arrangement that actually pay by the fundamental footprint of the cloud environment so that our partners have the full incentive to automate, because the more they automate, they get all the economic upside, but it also simplifies the way how we run our environment and makes it much easier and fast as we acquire additional business units. For example, if we need to scale up, we can do it very, very fast, right? Because all you need to do is do an asset inventory on the back of napkin. You can figure out what the appropriate cost needs to be. And of course, the cost optimization. This is where the partnership comes in. I think a lot of times the partners, I think in our experience, we of course have all the expensive tools, turbonomics, and all that tools. What we really learned is the tools are important, but frankly, working together with the Amazon team to look at architecture efficiencies, to bring their economics teams to build the proper financial models, that generates just about as much real dollar savings to our business as just chasing the tools, right? Of course, I think I talked about the multi-cloud environment and removing this whole legacy kind of the private cloud environment or just heavy focus on the infrastructure as a service. We are very, very intentional about uplift the value more into the platform as a service and software as a service environment. And you heard the examples of how we move the general ledger, the core banking into the public cloud environment. So in summary, what we're trying to do is we want, number one, being super focused on the value to the business. Number two is completing the journey to become the best technology cloud-based environment among all the major banks. And number three is leveraging our partner ecosystem to become the best managed technology environment. So we got 3 minutes for Q&A, and I'd like to just open it up for questions, if you have any questions. Questions or comments? Okay, all right. So with that, I think I love my friend Nagesh talked about what CTO stands for. Apparently it stands for, I used to think it's Chief Technology Officer. Now that I've learned it's really about cloud, technology platform, and outcome. So with that, I just touched on the cloud. It's my good pleasure to introduce my industry peer, Nasser from Cisco, to really talk about his experience of enabling the digital platforms for developer innovation and customer experience. Nasser.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
No, the flicker.
Oh, the flicker.
Thanks, John. It was really insightful on how you guys are using to really transform your workflows using cloud. And I'm here to share the story of how we used cloud technologies to really transform the customer experience for our Cisco customers when they interact with Cisco technical support folks. So my name is Nasser Mohammed. I'm part of Cisco IT team that supports Cisco technical support business. And I help manage the technical support platform where all the customers and partners come and reach out to Cisco if they have any technical issues with our products. So we are supporting this cloud-native platform, which supports like this whole case management platform we call, and this is like a big part of our Cisco services business. This is technical support is about $10.7 billion business. We do about 2.5 to 2.7 million support tickets every year. Internally, we have like about 18,000 engineers interacting with our customers and partners and solving their issues. And then we have these assets on Cisco.com where we have about 700,000 users interacting with Cisco folks on getting help and trying to use their products to the best maximum extent, right? So when we look at this case management platform, we at Cisco first look at like how we can leverage SaaS platforms. We can use solutions that are built on private cloud, and we have started using public cloud, AWS, in our use case, and I'm going to share a little bit more details about that. So when we talk about technical support, it is essentially customer calling Cisco, or they're reaching out on Cisco.com, and then they are like, hey, I have an issue with the product, right? And they like go and create this engagement request, which we call a service request, and it results in the like creation of a case in our backend system, and then you route that case to the best engineer, and it like that is matched to their technology and like who understand what issues the customers are facing with. So you have like a lot of this logic sitting to match that case to the best engineer. It of course shows up on their backlog. Then they work with the customers and like really try to diagnose and resolve the issue, and then of course like follow up with the customers that, hey, whatever resolution they did, it really solved the problem, right? And in this workflow, what is really important for engineers to really efficiently solve the problem is if they can get more information about their products or devices or what the failure is, right? And so it kind of becomes very critical for us to make sure that information is available to engineers at their fingertips during that workflow. And this is where we had a little bit of an issue. We had a legacy platform where we are storing all this information from customers. We take this information from customers and store it internally on a custom solution that was hosted in our private cloud within Cisco. But that platform had a lot of issues in terms of scalability. We are not able to add space to the existing solution as and when we need. We have like a lot of complexity managing this. We have resiliency issues. We have every month, every quarter, we would have downtimes. During our deployments, we will have downtimes. So it was a platform that is not scaling, and then this is really impacting our customer experience, right? Because when the customers come and try to provide additional information to engineers, the platform is not available at times. And so we had to kind of look at like, hey, what can we do about this, right? So then we started talking to our partners here, Infosys, right? And then AWS folks. AWS was being looked at within Cisco for implementing different solutions, right? So we started engaging these folks, and we kind of built this, thought of this system called CX files. So essentially, what is CX files? So this is a native, cloud-native solution, which is where customers can upload any information that they would like to share with Cisco, and which would help like solve their tickets faster, right? So when we look at what is CX files, so this is like we have customers, they have a lot of upload interfaces where they can go and provide information to Cisco. You have like Cisco support portals on cisco.com, and then they have like also like B2B integrations where they can, from their support portals internally, they can upload all this information through either command line interface or like their UI interfaces. And then they can also email that information to Cisco. And then off late, we are also leveraging a lot of self-service channel through chatbot interfaces. So they can upload information as part of that channel as well, right? And within CX files, right, when we look at AWS, we used all the great technologies that is available at AWS, right? So we used like all their S3, like for the storage, and then EC2 for all the compute, and then like all the different functionalities that are available that John also talked about, serverless implementations and things like that, right? So as customers are providing this information, it goes through like this whole encryption environment, and then also it's authenticated through AWS IAM, and then this flows through this whole AWS KMS system through the API gateways, and then we kind of manage all this things on Amazon S3, right? And Amazon S3 kind of gives you different options to different type of storage options, where you can like store like hot data which is available to you immediately, and then like you also look at like these older tickets where all this information you don't need to kind of use immediately, so you can have more cost optimum options like Glacier and things like that. So we came up with a strategy on how do you bucketize different things and come up with like optimum storage options. We use MongoDB service on Atlas, which is on AWS, to manage all the metadata about all this device information. Then we are using SQS for like sharing all the queuing notifications and things like that. And then also there are notification services where you are sharing like, hey, whenever you have uploaded or downloaded the information, we are sharing that with different clients, right? And then you have how this information that customer provided and that is sitting on AWS cloud, that can be used internally within different applications like Tag Console, where engineers are sitting on Salesforce cloud and they are kind of working through the workflow. Then they can download this information from the CX file systems. We have log analyzers and a lot of automations built leveraging this information. We are trying to kind of create like low touch, no touch kind of workflows where you don't have to have engineers like really looking at this data, but if you can script all this intelligence, then you can like really create and thread all this workflow using automation, right? So this kind of becomes critical, and this is something that even Adam talked about in this morning, right? Hey, how data is at the center of like business transformation. At that, and using this CX file solution, we thought like, okay, yeah, we really helped bring stability and resiliency to the existing platform and really pivot towards like having information at the fingertips for engineers, right? So in this journey, what are the issues that we face, right? So we, as I mentioned, like Infosys really helped us kind of with the experience that they had with other implementations. We have like a huge data set, right? So this is about, we have about 1.75 petabyte of device information sitting on this platform today. We migrated to AWS about 2 years back when we had like about 700 terabytes of data, and then metadata is about 750 GB, right? So the biggest thing for us is how do we migrate this huge amount of data, right? So this AWS has this solution called Snowball, right? So we used this, those Snowball devices were shipped to our data centers. We copied that data, and we had to come up with a different strategy to move that data to those Snowball devices. And then that got moved to the AWS data center. How do we improve the read and write latency? So this was one big issue because we are like a global company with global customers across different parts of the globe, right? And our internal cloud solution was on Cisco US data centers. So always you will have people from APAC or Europe complaining about like, hey, we are facing latency. So we use something called AWS performance transfer accelerators, to which kind of gives you like really good performance. They upload the data to the nearest AWS location, and then that gets moved to US data center. So this was like a really big performance boost. From security standpoint, of course, we are using the AWS key management system, and we are using the best encryption in the industry, and we also use something that we work with our security and trust organization on managing that. We are also using Cisco's solution to kind of, which is CLAM AV on AWS to like really scan all these uploaded data for virus and other things. So it's much more secure than what we had before. Of course, like how do we do this zero disruption migration? So we came up with like intelligent switch logic based on different kind of strategy, and to make sure that this was migrated in a way where customers didn't feel any kind of disruption, right? And then the metadata itself went to the MongoDB, which is a very scalable platform sitting on AWS, right? And then from resiliency standpoint, when we started, we moved to like 2 data centers on AWS. Primary was North Virginia in East Coast, and then our West Coast Portland was more like passive disaster recovery kind of setup. But since then, I think like about 2 quarters back, we have moved to like active kind of setup. So it's like seamless for customers, and they don't have to do, so it's like we are able to support like totally zero downtime with this. In terms of the usage metrics and outcomes, so we have like about 700,000 unique users on this platform. We are generating about 25 terabytes of data monthly, and about 4.5 million files monthly, and then we support 45 million upload, download requests on this platform. What did we achieve with this, right? So the best thing was like really improving our customer satisfaction, right? What we noticed was that there's about 5% improvement in customer sat when our workflows are using the informations that are sitting on this platform. So that's a big boost, right? So we were from like about 89%, we moved up to like about 95% in all these workflows that are leveraging this information. Upload, download time is like about 20% improvement, which is like huge, right? And I mean, that's much more even and much more better from different regions and things like that. client applications. When we started this, we had like about 20 applications integrated with this platform. It's just such a scalable platform. We got requests from like every like major applications in the enterprise, like, hey, how can we leverage this? Because they were trying to build the similar things, right? So this quickly became like like an enterprise asset where we are having like, this is like a storage solution at enterprise level. Availability, right? We were at like about 98%, now we are about 99.99%. So, and from security standpoint, like internally we have our security team certifying all these applications, so we are like 100% secure, certified, and then also we are big on like data retention policies and stuff, so all of that is like, again, 100% compliance with that platform. So this is in a nutshell our story and how we used cloud to really impact the customer satisfaction, how customers interact with our technical support folks. This would not be possible without the help from our Infosys partners, AWS and Mongo, who helped us on this journey. So I'll pause here and take any questions. All right, I'll hand it over to Tiro, who's going to talk about how they are using cloud at Kone.
Excellent, thank you, Nasir. It is so great to be here. Haven't really been on stage with live audience since the pandemic hit. And what could be a better place than reInvent? Because the audience is mainly about developers, architects, and technology specialists. So exactly the superstars making IoT possible. And without that, I wouldn't be here talking about the joy of IoT. So this one goes for you. Yes. So, a childhood friend of mine, Matt, who is nowadays based in beautiful Dubai, he is an architect in a big engineering office, and his actual office is in one of those big high-rise buildings. We try to meet once a year, at least, to just catch up what is going on, and this summer, Matt started really to rant for me about his job. Well, not his job per se. He loves his job and he is freaking good in his job, but he ranted about how difficult it is to get into the office and out to the office. And the reason why he ranted for me on that was that I work with Kone. So we are the leading global provider of elevators and escalators, so we are a people flow company. And Matt said that, Tero, there has to be a way for you to help me in this problem. The problem was that the specific building was designed for something else early on, but during the pandemic they needed to change the use of the building. It's designed in a way that in the middle there is a level that has like an outdoor restaurant, there is an event space, concert hall, whatnot, and there is a specific elevator groups taking people from the ground to that mid-level, and then there are separate elevator groups taking people from the mid-level to the top where the offices are. And surprise, surprise, this is the impact of that design. So when people try to get out of the offices at the end of the day, the mid-level is just packed. And if there is something going on in that event hall, it's just insane. So no one gets out. And this was the thing that Matt was ranting, that there has to be a way to solve this problem. And I said, no worries, we have done this a couple of times in different places. But I also realized that all of those cases have been very custom made, meaning also it's freaking expensive to do that. And I started to think that there has to be a way to do it in a scalable manner. And in fact, there is. It naturally starts with an elevator like everything else in this world typically. But the elevator has to be connected to the cloud, and there has to be also analytics within it. That's the way to solve the problem. So you have to be able to prioritize the calls for the middle level, preferably with empty cars, taking people down when they need to, and possibly also slowing down the elevators coming from the top in order not to push more and more people to an already crowded lobby. But this is not naturally enough, being able to control different elevators, where they are, when they are, how they are. You need to have a way to actually recognize the crowds in real time, which essentially means computer vision, which also requires rather heavy computing that needs to happen on the edge. But this is not enough. Those need to the edge needs then to communicate with the cloud-based elevators. So pretty much you are talking about a hybrid cloud solution. So on the edge, in the cloud, and very often also on-prem, because especially in this specific building also, there were several different elevator groups throughout the building. And if one wants to implement this kind of stuff so that there is a huge compute in each of the lobbies, it's rather expensive. So you want to have like one on-prem solution for that. And that requires then 5G, local 5G, in order to have adequately low latency, adequately big bandwidth. The reason why I'm showing this is just that these seemingly simple problems can be solved with technologies nowadays, but it requires the confluence of those technologies. So you really need to be able to integrate those seamlessly together. And what is needed to be able to do this seamless integration is to have the robust, solid platform like my good colleagues just were discussing about. And I wanted to talk to you about how we did this robust platform at KONE. We used to be running on a legacy platform that was built during the years together with several different vendors. And even though it did its job, it was sort of broken and definitely not scalable. So we turned to AWS and said that, hey, we want to be able to build our IoT platform, cloud platform, device management, and digital services on something that is future-proof, reliable, scalable, inherently secure. And that's what we have done together with AWS. So our digital platform renewal, just some figures out there, it took like a year and a half to accomplish that. So it was a massive, massive program. And I would be lying if I said that it was with flying colors. It definitely was not. There was all kinds of hiccups coming, problems on the way, but we had an excellent team working relentlessly, creating plan Bs, and completing those. And now we have the platform solidly up and running. Just on some of the figures, there was more than 10 different digital services we needed to migrate, 6 different IoT device types, and not talking about like single measurements, I'm talking about like complex master devices, different generations for different elevators, installed onto more than 200,000 elevators and escalators in more than 50 countries. So truly a global fleet of existing devices. And when we click the switch of the new platform, we have to be 100% sure that it goes smoothly. And it did. And this required more than 500 people closely involved in the migration program. And we had 3 main partners there, so we definitely didn't do it alone. 2 of those partners worth mentioning here, one naturally being AWS. Besides being the service provider, they have truly been our partner in crime throughout the whole journey and are also going forward. And the other one here is Infosys, who is responsible for our run operations. So 2 excellent world-class partners, definitely wouldn't have been able to do this ourselves. And this enables then us to focus on what we are actually good at. And that bit is here, so what this solid platform actually enables. So elevator is not anymore like a metal box on a rope, or well, it still is a metal box on a rope. But when it's connected to an IoT, it enables actually much more. So it actually enables that people flow within buildings, within stations, within cities, within environments. And there are like 3 different pockets that you can integrate with. One being like existing solutions within buildings, like building management systems for energy optimization as an example. Or then it enables providing those value-added services for the customer that we can do on top of our equipment. And then it also enables huge bunch of third-party applications, like a significant partner ecosystem, whether it's about visitor management or like integrating service robots or wayfinding, whatnot. And just highlighting 2 of these. Yep. First being one of our own services, 24/7 connected services. That is a intelligent predictive maintenance solution, a true evidence of power of IoT. We have 250,000 devices connected today, constantly generating data. having machine learning algorithms, generating the insights that what might be happening with the elevators, and then we kind of connect that with our field expertise. And the concrete results we have received are just rock solid. So we have been able to reduce more than 40% of the repair callouts of the elevators, so they don't anymore break down, as much at least. We have been able to reduce entrapments by 50%, so people not getting stuck into an elevator, which is, by the way, really very often can be a shit in the pants type of experience. And I can tell that from my personal experience. I was probably 10-year-old when I got entrapped in an elevator in Russia. That was scary. But that's another story. Getting back to figures, we have been able to predict more than 70% of the faults in advance. And it is not only about these like concrete values for customer in terms of safety, availability, usability, whatnot. It's also a sustainability thing. So there is a significant impact on the carbon footprint reduction when you can change part of your maintenance operations to be digital. The other solution I wanted to highlight is that it's not only about those like service robots or, I don't know, online elevator calls, whatnot. This is also something that with IoT, you can actually put people flow being inclusive. And this example is integration with Blind Square, the leading solution provider for blind people, like the wayfinding solution, giving you guidance where to go, when to go. And we have integrated these solutions together with the elevators, meaning that now there is the first time that the blind person can actually independently travel vertically within a building without someone escorting them. So really saying, okay, here is your elevator, now you can go in, now you're at the floor where you need to be, now the doors are open, you can go out and take rides, that kind of stuff. So, whether it's about solving the problem for Matt, whether it's about providing those added value-added services for the customers, or whether it's really like this broader inclusivity of people flow, it's all about IoT and how that enables it. And it's you guys who actually enable that, so you rock. Thank you.